we are called to be. That is so true. Moment by moment, we're called to be. This is the second talk in my series entitled Daring to Live Courageously. And this morning, I'd like to speak on the idea of perfection. Let's take a look at what it means to ourselves, our relationship to ourselves and to others, for us to understand that humanly we express imperfectly, and yet spiritually we are perfect. Basically, being perfect is the spiritual essence of what we are as creatures made in the image and likeness of God. Our life challenge is all about learning how to let this spiritual perfection express through us in our lives. This is called living a Christ-led life in the Unity teachings, and it's what we strive for in this school called life. Expressing as our perfect child of God's self, we strive to do our best. We are considered high achievers, pretty much. And when it comes to school or work, we turn in our work on time, we are prompt, we exceed expectations. And this is characterized by having high standards for ourselves and others, being persistent in the face of adversity, and being conscientious. It usually goes along with goal-directed behavior and our having good organizational skills. We're focusing on the positive, and we're motivated to do well. Not from out there, but from within. We do the best we can, and we don't get too upset if we don't quite meet all of our high goals, because we realize that we have done the best we can at that particular moment in the consciousness where we were at the time. We look forward to doing it better next time after having more experience. Thomas Edison, inventor of the light bulb, explained, "Negative results are just what I want," he said. "They're just as valuable to me as positive results. I can never find the thing that does the job best until I find the one that doesn't." Doing perfection. Now, I believe that perfect is what we be. And doing perfection or perfectionism is what we do or we try to do. Perfectionists suffer from what Brené Brown calls the life paralysis. I'm sorry, if you just adjusted that, I just adjusted this.
Oh, okay. We'll keep talking, okay. We'll figure it out.
She calls it life paralysis. She writes that life paralysis refers to all of the opportunities that we miss because we're too afraid to put anything out there in the world because it could be imperfect. It's also about, she says, all the dreams that we don't follow because of our deep fear of failing, making mistakes, or disappointing others. I saw an interview with Brené Brown and Oprah Winfrey. I think this was an old one, okay? And Brené asked Oprah, well, what is it you still fear? And Oprah said, I still fear failing. I still fear disappointing others, she said. And she said, I've gone through this stage in my life of people-pleasing, and I don't want to go back there again. Okay? And I've learned a lot about myself in this process, but I still, every now and then, I sense that I'm not completely free of this. Every now and then, it peeks its head, and I catch myself trying to please someone else at my own expense. And so she said, it's really true that we are forever learning, and there's ever more for us to learn. And I think she has a point there. I'm going to share the 10 traits, and there may be more, of perfectionists. And you're going to see that Brené's definition of life paralysis is going to be a part of most of these traits. Number one, an all or nothing thinking. Perfectionists are like high achievers, okay? And they set high goals and work hard to reach them. However, A high achiever can be satisfied with doing a great job and achieving excellence or something close to that. But a perfectionist shoots for the highest goal and isn't pleased. Even if they come close, they still consider that coming close as failure. Number 2, having a critical eye. Perfectionists are far more critical of themselves and others than high achievers are. While high achievers take pride in their accomplishments and they tend to be supportive of others, perfectionists tend to spot the tiny little mistakes that they make and the tiny little mistakes that others make. Now, because this can be problematic in relationships, they sometimes find that other people shy away from relating with them. They hone in on the imperfections and they have trouble seeing anything else. It's like that tiny dot becomes humongous, okay? And they are hard on themselves when failure does occur. Number 3, push versus pull. High achievers tend to be pulled toward their goals by a desire to achieve them. Something about that goal calls to them. They are excited about it. They are pulled to it. Now, this is not so with perfectionists. They are pushed toward their goals by fear and by the idea of not reaching that goal. Perfectionists often set their goals out of reach. They're not aware that they're out of reach, but they set them too high to be able to reach. Consequently, they fail, and then that just kind of is a catch-22. Number 4, unrealistic standards. Their perfectionist goals are not always reasonable. High achievers can set their goals high and enjoy and even have fun meeting that goal and the things that go along with getting to that goal. But for perfectionists, the eye is on the prize and only that. So they don't really enjoy the process of reaching the goal. It only matters if they reach it. And again, as I mentioned before, if they come close, that counts for nothing. That's like failure. They don't take into the fact that they have learned something valuable on the way. 5, focus on results. High achievers can enjoy the process of chasing a goal as much or more than actually reaching the goal. But perfectionists see the goal, like I mentioned, and nothing else. But they get so concerned in meeting the goal and avoiding dreaded failure that they can't seem to grow. And they withhold striving, actually putting themselves wholeheartedly into the effort. Number 6, depressed by unmet goals. High achievers are able to bounce back fairly easily when they are disappointed or they disappoint themselves. Perfectionists tend to beat themselves up and wallow in negative feelings when their high expectations go unmet. 7, fear of failure. Perfectionists are much more afraid to fail than high achievers because they place so much stock in the results and are disappointed by anything less than what they think is perfection. Others may say, hey, you gave it your best shot and you were darn good. Well, that's not enough for them because they haven't met that goal in their mind. And this leads to trait number 8, procrastination. Now, I'm sharing all of these. These are traits of perfectionists, but and I'm just getting to this one, number 8, and I realize that I suffer from this one, and I don't think of myself as a perfectionist. So you may see yourself in any of these 10 particular traits, but when they all come together, we've got a real live perfectionist. Procrastination, putting things off and not doing them until the last minute because of fear, of worry, or anxiety about the possibility of failure. Fearing failure. Perfectionists will often worry so much about doing something imperfectly that they become immobilized. Here again is that life paralysis. when I thought of this, I thought of Jesus and the man at the pool of Bethesda, the paralyzed man, and the fact that he had been laying by that pool of Bethesda for some 30 years, hoping to step into the pool when the water was troubled. Because they had a belief that when the water was troubled, that meant the angels were in there stirring up the water. And whoever was able to get into the water while it was still troubled, they would be healed. And so, for 30 years, he sat by this pool with the intent, we think, of trying to get in this water when the water was disturbed. But I don't know. And it seems like Jesus picked up on something also, because he had to ask the man, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be healed? Now, and I thought, well, surely he wants to be healed. He's still there at the pool after 30 years. But that's just the point. We can get so used to a condition, a situation, that we really have no desire to change it. Because change is also the unknown. And perfectionists fear the unknown because there could be failure. So in the story, we hear Jesus asking, well, do you want to be healed? And the man begins, he doesn't say yes, like I would think most people, yeah, man. Okay, no, he doesn't. He says, well, I tried getting in before, and this person got in before me, and this other person got in before me, and I don't have anybody to lower me in the water, okay? And so he's giving all these excuses, okay? And he, of course, is thinking like, well, the only way I can be healed is to get in this water when the water is troubled. And Jesus presents an entirely new scenario. Do you want, I can hear him say, man, I'm asking you, do you want to be healed, okay? And so then I can see that Jesus recognizes that the answer is yes. And so he tells him, okay, then take up your bed and walk. Okay. I think if the man were a perfectionist, he would not so easily be able to take up his bed and walk. Because what if I take up my bed and after these years, I haven't been walking in some 30 years, what if I try and I fall on my face? I'll feel like a fool. Everybody's going to be watching, okay? I think that is what a perfectionist would express if he were the man at the pool of Bethesda. So you can see how insidious this is. Number 9, defensiveness. Because a less than perfect outcome is so painful and scary to perfectionists, they tend to take constructive criticism badly and get very defensive. While high achievers can take criticism as valuable information from someone who is wanting to help them do better. 10, low self-esteem. High achievers tend to have equally high esteem, but not so with perfectionists. Perfectionists tend to be very self-critical and unhappy, and they suffer from low self-esteem. And they can be so unhappy and critical and rigid that they push others away. And this also affects their self-esteem. In our desire to dare to live life courageously, what can we do if we find that rather than being perfect by seeking to express ourselves as children of God, we are challenged by doing perfection instead? When we become more aware of the presence of Christ in us, we will choose to change the way that we are reacting to life. We will choose to change the way that we're thinking about ourselves based on the understanding of our true story. I happen to love a book called Love Wins by Rob Bell. And Rob Bell was a traditional Christian pastor until he had a new insight that kind of turned him around in his thinking. And he began believing that there wasn't any hell, and sounding so much like a unity minister that his fellow ministers were very critical of him, and he left his church. Well, he began writing a series of books, which are still well read. Okay, but in this particular book, I love that Rob Bell says, the problem with us is that we have stopped believing God's story of us. And we have begun to create our own story, but it's based on falsehoods. It's based on ego stuff. It's based on negative thinking, limited experiences that we've had. It's based on messages that we've taken in, that we've accepted in our environment. Maybe from parents, from relatives, maybe from the teacher, okay? I remember a story that Karen Drucker shared in her last online newsletter. She said she loved to sing as a child. And one day the teacher said, "Hey, let's all sing a song. Let's sing." And she was roaring at the top of her voice, okay, until the teacher said, "Karen, why don't you hum?" And here's a person who has made her living writing music and singing. And she was almost stopped in her tracks by that experience, she says. But she overcame that. Because it created a tremendous amount of fear in her. She wanted to be good. She was not a perfectionist, but this was something else, okay? This was tearing at the heart of something that she loved. And she gave this teacher a lot of power. And often we do that. And procrastinators do that, and perfectionists do that as well. They give this fear so much power over them. They give the thought of failure so much power over them that they wait till the last minute or don't really even try. Okay? Because if they don't really even try and they fail, they can always comfort themselves with the thought that they didn't have their heart in it anyway, and it wasn't important anyway. When we become aware that we have the Christ within us, and this is something that Unity teaches us, we are all born with the Christ in us. Now, Christ is not the same as Jesus. Jesus, in our teachings, became aware of the presence of God within, and he learned how to let that express in and through him. And therefore, Jesus became Jesus the Christ. And so what each of us is doing is we are all becoming Christs in expression, because Christ is the principle of God. It is that which is only begotten of God, that which we have received, which is only begotten of God. This inner Christ is the only begotten of God. And because of this, we are endowed with spiritual gifts, with power, with imagination and understanding, and all of these other 12 spiritual gifts. There are even more, but Fillmore outlines 12 particular main spiritual gifts. And these are represented by the disciples in the story of Jesus. And like Jesus, we are called upon to work with these spiritual qualities, to develop them and to use them for good, to use them to bless and be blessed in the world. This makes us the light of the world, which Jesus declared that we are. This awareness of God's presence in us as love, supporting us and guiding us, empowering us, makes us worthy. We don't have to worry about failure, because we can think of that failure as a stepping stone, an experience that will help us the next time we encounter that particular situation or that opportunity. That is a wonderful way of how to accept defeat, we might say. This presence makes us fearless, okay? Compassionate, patient, and capable of changing our lives by using our thoughts in a creative way. This gives us the power to change our limiting negative thinking. Becoming aware of how Christ's nature is critical to understanding who we are and how we relate to others. If we think of ourselves as, we're just flawed human beings, okay? We're just sinners, okay? We don't have much to go on here. We don't have much motivation, much drive to put ourselves out in the world and to challenge ourselves to grow. this presence, which Jesus came to know and identify, was an active principle in him, and it is an active principle in us as well, this Christ self. It is our perfect God self just waiting to unfold in us and through us. Imagine that. God is waiting on us. Why do we make God wait? An image that I like to use about God, this Christ self in us unfolding, is like a flower, a rose opening up. I've taken photographs, I love to do this, of the heart of roses as they are just beginning to open up and spread their petals. The lotus plant in India is sacred for that very moment. It's a symbol of the God presence opening up. And with the lotus plant, as I understand it, it grows on a very, very long stem, and usually in murky water. But that long stem allows it to stay up on top, and it floats on top of the water, on top of all that troubles it. We, like lotus plants, can rise up and move past what troubles us. Whether we are challenged with perfectionism or any of the other traits of perfectionists, we can rise up above this. What's that saying that the traditional Christians used to sing? There was a song, we are more than conquerors in him who loves us. Well, this Christ presence in us is what is the conqueror in us. Using spiritual practices, prayer, meditation, contemplation, yoga, so many things, okay? Maybe fishing out on the lake for someone, okay? Might be a contemplative or meditative experience. We can use this time to reflect on this presence in us. And we do this, we consciously connect with it. We snap those two pieces together, and there is connect going on. And then we can allow it to work and express through us consciously. We can take our cue from Jesus, who in Matthew 15 tells us, 15 verse 7, if you abide in me and my words abide in you, whatever you wish, it will be done for you. To abide means to accept without objection. It means to continue to be with something, to live with something, to let something be a part of us. It abides in me. He said the kingdom where God lives is within us. 17:12. And so our abiding in the word, in the understanding of our Christ self, is us living with it day by day, choosing to be Christ-led in our activities. He also said, we are the light of the world, Matthew 5:14. He said that what he did, we can do. And in John 14:12, Jesus says, verily, I tell you. Don't you love that word, verily? It just kind of rolls off your, verily, verily. Oh, that's merrily, sorry. merrily, merrily, merrily. Life is just a dream. Anyway, verily, he says, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works that I do, and greater shall he do, because I go to the Father. Meaning, I'm connected to the Father. I realize my connection, my oneness with God, and you can too. And when you do, you can do the things I do, or greater. In Luke 12:31, Jesus says, fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. John 14:20, Jesus speaks about our oneness with him, with God, and with others. He says, on that day you will realize that I am in my Father, you are in me, and I am in you. On the program, Tony Swartz has written something I really enjoy here. The main part of this that I want to focus on is the last sentence in his quote. The ultimate challenge, he says, is to accept ourselves exactly as we are, but never stop trying to learn and to grow and to be more. I love that thought. So we start by taking the negative thoughts that we do self-talk with. Learning to catch ourselves when we are using words that put ourselves down. And then remember that we are expressions of God and that Christ dwells within us. And so to help do that, we can ask ourselves a couple of questions. What would love do? When we find ourselves speaking negatively about ourselves, putting ourselves down because we failed or we have fear or anxiety or whatever that is, we can stop ourselves, okay, and ask, what would love do? If love were here, would love speak this way to me? And choose to change. Choose to respond to ourselves the way love would. What would Christ do? What would Jesus say? And so we speak to that limited negative thought or those words that we have been speaking to ourselves and choose to change them. And we can because we have good reason. If we truly realize that we are the expressions of God, and as Jesus told us in Luke 17:12, that the kingdom of God is within us, why would we continue putting ourselves down? Why would we continue to use words that are not uplifting and encouraging and inspiring and healing for ourselves? So if we find ourselves using this, let's take time to reconnect with that presence in us that gives us our value and worth, because we are indeed of worth and value. Jesus shares this with us in many stories, in many parables, and the one I'm thinking of now is when he speaks about how the birds that do not toil are fed by God, and how the grass, which today is growing wild and tomorrow withers, how that grass is clothed in color and vibrancy. And he asks the question, meaning he wants us to ask ourselves, are we not more than the birds or than the grass, and worthy of God's love, care, concern, support? And in my mind, this is how we work at daring to live courageously when the challenge that we face is perfectionism. That's not being perfect, that is doing what we think of is perfect in the eyes of others. Thank you. God bless you.